times build character.
This isn't just a show, this is real life. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish.
You gotta see it before anyone else can see it.
Every second, every minute, every day.
We train for life. We got you.
Welcome back, everybody. Season 2, episode number 5, the Relentless Way podcast. We are here on YouTube for those watching. We are on Apple Music and Spotify as well as Amazon Music, so definitely listen in. We always ask everybody to start off with episode 1 of season 1. Follow us through the journey. Get all perspective and insight from all of our amazing guests that we've had so far, as well as conversation between Matt and myself. So today we have another very special episode, someone that has been very influential to Matt and myself inside the facility, as much as maybe he really doesn't recognize it, with the influence that he has on us through conversation and just through being a leader to us with his success so far throughout his life. So we have, for episode number 2, titled When Pigs Fly, we have founder and CEO of Propellus, Ralph Johnson. So welcome, Ralph.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, of course. We're excited for this one. We have had a lot of friends, family, members and clients that become friends and family on these episodes. So we're very excited. I want to get right into it and let the people here that maybe don't talk to you in the facility, that don't know you as much or from the outside, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, that's a pretty broad question.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm a lot of things. I am a CEO of a company. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son, and I take pride in all those things. But I think what I am, if you had to boil it down in one word, is I'm just a competitor,
right,
in every aspect of life, whether it's work, play, even my own personal journeys and competing against myself. I just thrive on the idea of being better, period. It doesn't matter what the subject is. If we're playing Pictionary at someone's house, I want to win.
Right, for sure.
So, and it could get annoying sometimes, I get it. Sometimes I have to dial it back. I mean, my wife because not everything is the World Series or the Super Bowl, but to me, I think it's a mindset that I have always found myself in, no matter what the category is, but also no matter what age I was. It started at a very young age, and I don't really know how that began for me, because I came from a background of a great family and a lot of love and support, but my biological father walked out on us when I was very, very young. And I had a tight relationship with my grandparents, and we lived with them. And money was tight and everything was tight, but never wanted for anything. But I remember, even at a very young age, playing things with my grandfather, whether it was checkers or chess or wiffle ball out in the street, and he wouldn't always let me win. Right. And I see a lot of that today, where parents or aunts, uncles, whatever, let these tiny toddlers win at everything. And I understand the mindset, because when I had kids, I did that a little bit too.
Yeah.
But then I realized that it's not healthy to always let them win. They need to win on their own, and they need to understand losing too. Losing is a big part, I believe, of developing your character to be a winner. You can't just expect to walk out and win every time. And if you're handed that early on, I think it ruins the journey. But in any event, I remember losing a lot and being very upset about it. So maybe that's where it began.
Yep.
You have to have that pride and not be okay with losing. I mean, it's one thing to lose and be gracious about it. You still don't have to accept it. You don't have to be an ungracious loser, which I think is another important lesson. But I think that hating to lose is a trait that can carry you through a lot of different things in life, not just business and sports, but relationships and family things and stuff like that. So I think maybe that's an early lesson that I learned subconsciously, kind of, that set the tone for the rest of my life. Because even to this day, I'm one of the most competitive people
Right.
that I know.
Yeah.
But and you guys know that because not only from the conversations we had, but just from my own journey within Relentless.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came here, I could not even lift a 1 pound dumbbell
Right.
because I was just fresh off shoulder surgery, and I almost didn't come.
Mm-hmm.
But out of recommendation of a friend of mine, I came by and met Matt first, and Matt, obviously recognizing what my limitations were, said we could work with it. Right away I was discouraged, like, this is a waste of time, what am I doing here? I saw the facility, it's this big, beautiful facility with all these things. I'm like, I can't do any of this, so why am I here?
Yeah.
And then he just immediately could sense my energy, that I was willing to work from the bottom, and I was willing to do the little things. The number on the side of the plate meant nothing. All I wanted to do was get stronger, get better, so I can be the best version of myself, which is something what we always say. And I mean, we clicked like that.
Yeah,
so the relationship took off, and I became motivated to come here and get better, which I had never. Just to go back a second, I had never really had a membership at a gym or anything like that. I've always worked out at home. I've always played sports. So for me to commit to this program and this long-term journey was something different for me. But I recognized immediately the value, not only in the facility itself, but in the people, and you guys, and then people you brought in. It's like a family. It's part of my day now and part of my schedule. That's automatic. As automatic as anything else that I do. And it's also never been like that for me in terms of my physical workouts or sports. It was always kind of like, do you have some free time? Let's do this. Maybe Saturday morning I'll do this. But this is part of my schedule, and everybody else has to work around it. Because I made a commitment to it. And it kind of really settled in during the pandemic because we had a lot of extra time, people working from home and things like that, but I'm not going back now. So it is now ingrained in me, and I can see how people who spend their whole lives doing what you do, fitness and helping people get better, I can see how that is. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy after a while, because if you just put in the extra work, it'll happen, but you have to commit to that time.
Right.
And if you do it halfway, it's not going to work. You have to dive into it and just trust the process, which is something that we always say too.
Awesome stuff. Gave a great insight, great background, and I think a lot of people are really feeling off the bat. They're gonna understand what you're about. You talk about one of the things that stuck out to me is you said being better. You didn't say being better than someone else. You didn't say being the best, and like you talked about winning, but that's not where your line went. You went to me being better. Right. By you being better, that's going to help you win and have success, right? Along the way, now let's talk about how the competitiveness and you being better has brought to where you are now in more of your professional life with your business and with what you have going on with from Global Factors to Propellus, now the company that you have grown and built.
Yeah, just to touch on what you said, I think being better is an important distinction than being better than something or someone else, because everything's relative.
Yes.
So I think if you try to hold yourself to that standard, you may never always choose the right benchmark. But if you just tell yourself you want to be a better version of yourself, you are the benchmark,
right. And
you're the one that keeps setting the bar.
Yes.
So I could say I want to be a better football player than Tom Brady, but that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an unattainable goal that would just derail my entire journey. So I just want to be the best version of myself, and that can keep me going indefinitely, because you can always improve every day. And I think that's something that's important.
That's important. And since Matt taught you all this and really has built you up to
So I don't want to ever say I'm be better than Matt, because that's an impossibility.
What I was going to say is have Matt and Ralph have really worked closely together. Ralph does mention the team and everyone really coming really getting to know him. He's just a likable guy and an interesting guy, you know, but fun to be around. What have you learned about yourself, about him, like going through working closely with each other?
Well, I think, like you said earlier, we've definitely been blessed to gain a lot of beautiful relationships with people that have turned to, you know, started out as clients or members, and then just over time you start understanding how like-minded people can be, you know, and that's where we are today. It's a short time that we've known each other, but it was like expedited to just like extremely like-minded and drawn to the point of, you know, who he is and how he carries himself and what he does is an extremely, it's at a very high level of living and leadership. And I think that's something that you and I constantly have spoken about, and to meet someone that carries that weight on their shoulders, but then also carries it like, it's what I'm supposed to do, is something that we were immediately drawn to. I think in the beginning, you know, coming in, it was like he said, it was a moment of, I was told one thing, and then he came to me, it was a separate thing, which didn't mean anything, right? Because he was who he is deep down, right? So I heard about the competitor, the athletic, a Krav Maga specialist as well, dedicated his life 10 years to that. So I'm hearing all these things, and then when I see him, he couldn't even move his arm. So two different stories, but in that moment, even in itself, the fact of us just dialing it down for a second and him giving me a shot, for me to be like, no, like, it's okay, like, we'll still get back to that stuff, but we gotta go back to the foundation real quick. Like, I gotta go back and I gotta check a couple things, I gotta reset the foundation. And he's like, okay. And like, but that also showed.
Which, by the way, I don't want to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but at 47 at the time,
Yeah.
is not an easy thing to want to commit to.
I can only
Because having to start all over again on how to move my arm and having zero strength and almost no mobility, almost wants you to make you throw in a towel on fitness. Because you feel like, I can't do it, so what's the point? Now I got to spend the next 6 months just to be able to do this. But, I mean,
being the competitor you are, though, that's what brings it
drove me, is because I did
right.
not want to spend the next 40 years,
Yeah.
God willing,
Yeah.
not being able to do the things that I want to do. And, you know, not being able to throw a baseball is like, for me, not walking.
Right,
So,
for sure, right.
and I know as an older guy it sounds silly, because a lot of people will tell me, why do you even have to have that surgery? Just stop throwing a baseball, just stop playing. And I said, can't do that.
Yeah. That's where it
That would be
starts. That's where
quitting.
declines. Yeah, that's
Right,
where
so
declines
again,
start. Right?
it wasn't about necessarily winning baseball games, because, you know, again, I'm playing, you know, not in the World Series, I'm
Right.
not playing for the Yankees,
Yeah.
but it's something that I enjoy,
For sure.
and I would not want that out of my life. So when the option was do nothing and just have this limitation where you can't lift your hand, and I know people like that, relatives, other friends, that can't even have a catch with their kid
Right.
or grandkid, or throw a ball for the dog or whatever. I mean, for me, that's why. Just
declining.
I understand it's tough, and that was the big thing. People say it's such a bad surgery, it takes so long to recover and so long to rehab, and you may never be the same. And I get all that, but that was what I felt I needed to do. And then I ended up doing both shoulders, because once I had one done, I said, wow, now I have everything back, let's do the other one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was tough a couple of years, and I mean, you know how tough it actually was, but it was tough.
It's unbelievably challenging, but I think you have the wherewithal in those moments to say, 40 years of not doing, or the rest of my life of not doing
Right.
this, that decline will happen a lot faster than
Sure.
potentially, you know, recovering from the surgery.
Absolutely.
As hard as it is in that compounded time, that's the difference. You know, that's the difference in someone with a mindset like Ralph, you know, someone that's competitive within himself and within his limits, right? But also understands what it means to him every day to do these things, you know, and how it uplifts you.
There's definitely still limits now,
Oh, of
right?
course.
Because of age, because of whatever else. But I want to give myself, it's going back to being the best version of yourself. I want to give myself the best opportunity to be who I want to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like, even at this age, now I'm 51, I feel like I'm out there playing sports and whatever else with kids half my age.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm the best player on the field, but I'm holding my own, and I'm definitely very competitive in my age group. So for me, I still feed off that. I still get joy from that, and it's just something that'll never go away. I just didn't want to give all that up.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready, and it was not in me to give it up. So it was a no-brainer, but at the time that I had the surgery, I really didn't have anybody to take me on that journey. I was going to go it alone and just kind of YouTube it and everything else, right? But then...
And you would have.
I would have, but it wouldn't have been as good as when we got together and I came to Relentless. Again, something I never probably would have done, but because of all these changes in my life physically, I said, let's give this a shot, because I'll give everything a shot.
Right.
Even Krav Maga, you talked about the Krav Maga, I had taken different types of martial arts, literally for a week or two at a time. Said I didn't like that, I don't like this. No disrespect to any of those other styles, but for me, I was looking for something specific. And when I found that, I dove into it.
You went on that long journey,
11 years. So, and it was not really I was not their cup of tea, right? It's a very tight community, Israeli, and very specific, a lot of young kids. And here I walk in my mid-30s, this, Italian kid from Staten Island, and they're like, who is this? This guy wants to study Krav Maga. Like, okay. But they pushed me really hard, hoping I would quit. I think a lot of people quit. But it was just the bar they set. I think that's kind of what I liked.
Yeah.
I honestly went home the first or second week and said, this is just way too tough. I can't do it. Like in my head, I had that moment.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, I was getting thrown on the floor, and it was intense.
And then what was the response to that moment?
The other side of my brain said, no, but that's what we want. Yeah, that's exactly what you were looking for, was something, the line in the movie, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Tom Hanks. Yeah. So I like that. I like when things are tougher, and it's nice to coast a little bit every now and then, but I think when you have that type of personality and that type of competitiveness on the inside, you're always seeking the challenges so that you hope to rise to that occasion and then end up on the top.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's important. I think that's an important journey.
No, I mean, extremely well said. And I think in the moment of when I met you, I was way more confident in myself, in my physical abilities, in what I could bring to the table. So whether it be if we were going to go into the intense side, like training hard and doing all that stuff, but I couldn't. But then the corrective side, I also was extremely confident in, and to me, it was just the moment that we would take. But that's where I also knew that we had that like-minded, that competitive thing, because it was still a challenge. Like, to me, I see this challenge, right? But to play off of what you just said as well, like they say, like, lions don't eat wounded prey in the jungle, right? Like, it's not always just about going, like, you don't want just to get the food.
Right.
It's also about the hunt. And you've learned that already because of the experience and the wisdom that you've had in life a little bit more. But it was cool because it was a feeling that we kind of had already, but then you just complimented to it. And I think when you were able to, I didn't know the stature truly of who you were in the moment. Like, I knew you were self-made. I knew you were self-created. I didn't know much about it, though. Like, I just knew that there was a strong presence from your name, from the people that I knew. So going in, I respect everybody, though. To me, you're just someone I'm going to meet when I'm going to respect you.
Anyway,
and yeah.
You're building this up. I'm a nobody. There's a million guys out there.
Yeah, Ralph Johnson's an easy made-up name. That's what we did for this
episode.
episode.
All made up.
No, but I think in the moment then of using what I was confident in, but then learning more about who you were, but then you got to really help bring out the confidence in the other side of me, of the entrepreneur, the self-made, these conversations of really being relatable, of knowing like what it feels like to either have nothing and then slowly build something, and being moments of just being the only one to see it in your head, so and then getting one guy to come along, and that's where I believe that I was extremely drawn to the connection.
When I was watching a little more from the distance, like your relationship build, and then getting to know you more, and getting to know Matt as he grew more through you, that's what I saw. You mentioned about the hunt, right? For you in that moment, this type of journey wasn't something that you really went out and ventured and took your time with and wanted to enjoy the hunt. He found a way to slow you down in the moment and bring you through the process, and now you've realized even more, like you said 10 times already, you would have never visioned moving forward that you would have took a fitness lifestyle journey like this at a facility with someone like Matt.
Yeah,
so
if you would have
from
told
the
me
outside
I was
to see
coming there
that
5 days a week,
yeah, right.
3 years ago, I would say that'll never ever happen.
And I think that's the difference, though.
Especially
you know?
at 8, 7 in the morning or 8 in the morning, whenever we do.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. First of all, it's you're very flattering what you're saying, and no, honestly, saying that hearing that I have an impact or an influence. I mean, it's one thing to hear to expect that from my son or other people but we don't.
They'll tell you one day.
Yeah,
is that how it works?
We don't have that relationship, the traditional relationship where like employer, employee, or mentor, or son, where that kind of influence is kind of implied.
Yes.
This was a different relationship where really I'm coming to you for the expertise, and then you're now turning it around saying that you got something out of it. It's very flattering and humbling. But I wanted to say, while you were talking, I was thinking of something else that's important, is the evolution of yourself. Because what works for you in any aspect, whether it's physical, work, sports, if it worked for you 2 years ago, doesn't necessarily mean it works now. And you have to be able to adapt and evolve. And I think that's an important part of success in any subject. But I've seen it firsthand. I've done it firsthand in every aspect of my life, and I think that is the key. One of the biggest keys to success is adaptation and evolution. And to talk more about what I'm doing now, that is all an evolution of
That was my next question.
what I've always done. So,
Right.
I started out on Wall Street a little over 30 years ago. At the bottom of the barrel, at the lowest rung possible, right? Which everybody does when they get into the industries. You get on the phone and you're a cold caller. Now this is all the way back in the late 80s, before the internet, before we were dialing out a phone.
We were just making our way to the world.
Hey,
Right? So
this is the wisdom.
right. Well, we always talk about that because I'm literally 21 years older than you, right? And Drew is 20, right?
Drew's 20
Yeah.
right
So
now.
I was joking around. I'm like, take your whole life
Yes.
and add it to his whole life, end to end. And that's. I'm still older than both. So that's also another humbling thing to be able to be relatable.
I was gonna say, yeah, you carry relatability very
Like,
well. With all the
I don't
ages.
feel like this old guy in the gym, even though I am. I don't feel like.
Well, that's
you
the
guys
topic
don't
of
make me feel.
Well,
that
that's
way.
also the topic of what we were talking about, the innovation and being able to evolve
Right,
and
you try to
adapt.
stay current.
Right, yeah.
But starting at the bottom like that is a humbling experience because I remember being in high school and before I was going to college trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had always loved numbers and money. I was enamored with Wall Street and the stock market and all that. So I immediately just, gravitated toward finance as a major, and I went to a heavy finance major school in Manhattan. I only applied to one school. I didn't have a lot of money to go. I had to pay for college myself, so I had to make a choice that was mostly based on economics, but I wanted to go to the best school I could afford.
Right.
So I went to the best school I could afford. I went to Pace University, which is not a great school. It was a great school. At the time, it was very, very well known for accounting, and I thought I was going to maybe be an accountant in a Wall Street firm, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. Nobody does when they're 17.
Yeah.
So I realized very quickly, though, that I hated accounting. So I wanted something a little bit more creative.
I was gonna say
in the
20-year-old.
finance. Yeah, I was just couldn't push a pencil. I didn't like for the rest of my life.
Yep.
No offense to accountants, because they're
Correct. No.
some of the
Necessary.
smartest people I've ever
Yeah.
met. I deal with them on a daily basis, and I respect what they do, and they've taught me a lot.
Right.
Stuff that when I was doing it when I was 19, couldn't understand. It was like a new language. Now I use it every day, and I'm like, wow, I wish I could have understood this then. But anyway, when I got to my senior year of school, I was telling people asking, what are you going to do? Where are you going to work? And it was very tough finding a job. And the starting salaries back then for an entry level, 4-year degree person with decent grades was in the 20s, mid 20s. There's not a lot of money. Okay, I know it's a long time ago, but still, that was not a lot of money back then. 26,000, 27,000. you still would have had to live home with your parents if you live in the tri-state area. It's not a lot of money. And I remember, I used to get magazines at the train station, Forbes and all these magazines, and read through them and see all these guys making millions and millions of dollars and find out where they started. And all of these guys went to great schools, Harvard, they went to Yale, they went to MIT, and these guys were all coming out of school, getting MBAs and making over $100,000 a year, right? And I'm just like, okay, that can't be me because I couldn't take that path,
Right.
okay? But I still want to be that guy. So I remember when people asked me,
Yeah.
I remember my mother asking me, my dad, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? And I would tell him I want to work on Wall Street. I want to work in a firm, and I want to work in finance. And I said, this is going to be me. And I remember I had this article, and I still have it. I still have it. I ripped it out, and it's all yellowed and everything. But I cut it out, and it said starting salary for the average Wall Street executive is like $110,000. Now, at the time, I thought that was me. Like, oh, I'm just going to go get a job, and I'm going to make $100,000 a year. I didn't realize that article really meant top business school students graduating from a top college with top grades, working at a top firm, and
the best, like the best of the best,
cream of the crop. I'll tell you 1% of 1% of the crop.
Right.
But I ripped out the article like, oh, this is me. Boom, pin on the bulletin board, right? So when I tell my mother and my dad, yeah, this is me. I'm going to do this. And my father's like, you're not going to make $100,000 a year out of school. It's just not going to happen. My dad is the hardest working guy I know. He's retired now, thank God. But he worked his whole life, busted his ass, and he did not make not even a third of that at that time annually. But he used to work overtime.
So at that time, especially, he's looking at you,
and he's looking at me, the snot-nosed kid. This is going to go out and make, right? And I was a smart ass back then too, which was another evolution. Thank God that I worked out of my system. But the key for me was I just said I saw something. Maybe it was unrealistic and it was unattainable, but I said to myself, that's going to be me. So long story short, I go to Wall Street. I get this bottom rung job where I'm making literally $5 an hour on the books, okay, and working 100 hours a week, only getting paid for 40.
Right.
Okay? They didn't care. There's no labor laws in Wall Street. And I remember taking home my first check for, it was like maybe 180 hours worth of work, and I think after taxes, and I still have the check too home, $176.81 after taxes. And whatever.
What'd you buy?
My Metro card.
To get you to work the next
but
week.
it was just like, and it was tough go. But I used to. Another thing that I learned is I would watch people who were successful, and try to feed off of that, emulate it, but also make it my own. I don't want to completely be a copycat, but I see that it's working. So I'm going to do that, but then I'm also going to improve where I think I can improve, but I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. So if he's having success doing things a certain way, I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to build on that with my own innovation and use my own experiences. But I think that when I look back in that couple of year period where I first started out, that first year, by the way, I did make $100,000.
Nice.
And
that was your first year out of school.
First year out of school. Right. And I mean, it was uncanny. I'm not saying that. And a lot of people did it though, so I wasn't special, but it was something for me that at the end of the year when I had that W-2 and I looked at it and I showed it to my father. Not to rub his nose in it, but I wanted him to be proud of me. Yeah. And he looked at it and he said, I just don't understand how you did that. And I almost said the same thing, but it was not an easy journey.
And that was also a moment that was the first moment that you proved to yourself.
I was just going to say
when you see something and you dedicate yourself to something, it is obtainable.
But that had always been the case. So I had always felt like if I ever put my mind to something, or if I said I want to do something, it would get done. It may not get done the best out of other people who have done it or whatever. but I would always give it 100% effort, which I think is always important. Because if you give something 100% effort, then usually the results will follow. I think a lot of people fall short because they don't give 100%.
They truly don't give 100%.
Truly, like commit. You may in the beginning, but then you trail off, and then you want to blame. People like to blame something else.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, just the effort is what guarantees you the results.
Well, it seems like also in this moment, it was like the biggest scale you've been on yet too. So like that first year out of college, you accomplished all these things that were big in the moment,
Right.
and then this was like the big. This was the
Yes.
first big step.
But then that becomes a stepping stone for everything else, because everything that used to be big to you is not big anymore.
Yeah.
And that's another important part of going up the ladder, is that never accepting that your big accomplishment is the one. And we've had this conversation before. So that year, then the next, I set my sights on now, buying a house. I was 23 years old. I had no business thinking about buying a house at the time, but renting an apartment was the same amount of money as if I was going to buy a house and get a mortgage. I mean, the prices of houses back then were nothing like they are now. Young kids have it tough. But we looked at a couple of houses. Boom. I got married. I bought a house. I had a new car. I had a vacation. I felt like I was doing everything that I wanted to do. And then life has a way of coming along and smacking you in the face. And this is what I'm talking about. Part. So it's like 2 steps up, 1 step back, but you got to get yourself back up. So my first son was born with a chromosome disability, and it's something you don't plan for, and that could completely derail everything in your life. And it did for a while. My ex-wife at the time had a very tough time with it. It's tough, very tough on her. But for me, I felt like, okay, I'm not going to be upset forever on what he's not capable of doing, because he was nonverbal, he has motor issues, he has cognitive issues, and he's never going to be able to live by himself, right? So that's something that it really smacks you down hard, because we've all been there, we all have children, right? So your first child is like, and I thought he was going to be me, right? And now I have to accept that he's going to be him, and that's okay. But it's just a different journey, and I had to make a conscious decision to celebrate who he is and what his identity is going to be, and not that he can't be mini me. And it's not something that everybody can do, and sometimes my strength may have been taken as indifference, and that's where it became difficult in my relationship. And unfortunately it didn't work out. But as he's gotten older now, our relationship's been better, and time heals a lot of wounds. But that was the first real setback in my own personal life, other than growing up without much and all that stuff. Because to me, that was normal. My neighborhood was like that. Everybody was like in the same boat. So it wasn't like I was much less off than everybody. Some kids at school had Nikes and I had Kmart sneakers. It's okay. At least I had sneakers. Well, there are a lot of people worse off than me.
Even in now in these moments where your son is born, and now you probably look back at that moment even more and say,
for sure,
shit, and all that other shit,
right?
Was
Doesn't matter. It's relative. But what it does do is it prepares you for adversity. Maybe not that big of an adversity, and at that moment you're going to be tested. But listen, it was tough. I mean, I went through 4 or 5 months where it was really, really tough. But other people, maybe not have done so well, but handled it as well. But that sets you back. So then that trickled into my professional life, into my relationships with friends, because now people felt like they couldn't relate to me. They were having their own children. Everybody felt bad to bring their kids around my son Dean, because they were like, they're running around on the playground and Dean is barely able to sit up and hold his head up.
And also how you're responding to it too, like you said, it's very different. Like you're
right, but people
you have your moments,
but
you're strong and confident about it. That in itself,
right,
to some people in life is intimidating too.
But I think that's where also some things stem from that. In terms of my personality, I went out and joined a parent network for children like Dean. I went out, I actually got on the board of directors of that foundation, and then I just kept working to bring awareness. When Dean was diagnosed pre-internet, okay, again, could you imagine your child, your first child, being diagnosed by a doctor saying he's never going to do this, this, and this. Back then they called it mentally retarded, right? And you can't even look it up.
Yeah, you have very limited resources.
Like, you're just listening, like, he gave me a pamphlet.
Right.
And I'm flipping through this pamphlet, like, and you just want to jump off a building because it's the worst literature you've ever read in your life. But it wasn't what reality was, because there's degrees of it, and it's all subjective, and everybody's different. But when I joined this parent network, it was mostly by telephone. And we would go physically meet with these parents once a year at this annual conference, and we would exchange information and experiences and doctors' names. And it was a support network at its root, but it was also a way of getting information pre-internet. A couple of years later, the internet was more readily available, and we were able to get more information. But that setback and the way that I reacted to it is typical of, I feel, when I look back, that was typical. Like, it was a no-brainer. That's the way I had to handle it.
Yes.
And, now a couple of years later, after he was born, we had 9/11, which, just as I was getting my feet under me, he was like 2 or 3, and just getting my feet back under me. Okay, now I know what his routine is, what we need to do, the doctor visits, the this, the that, the financial aspect, the emotional aspect, and then all of a sudden, to fly 2 planes into the buildings, and now my world is upside down again. I was literally in the building the day before, and just happened to not be in that building that morning, and was, literally saw it happen live with my own eyes. I was there within close enough to get ash on me, but that screwed me up for another 6 months to a year, just mentally and financially. Nothing was the same immediately after that. But all of these setbacks, they either crush you or they make you stronger. And it's just a bunch of scar tissue building up. And just when you thought, my point was, just as you thought it couldn't get any worse, then something else happened.
Yes.
So I wanted to tie it into the evolution that I alluded to earlier, is because things that we did pre 9/11 in my industry didn't work post 9/11, because now the world has changed. Just like the airline industry changed and everything changed. So people did things differently in business and on Wall Street because of the risk and because of the fear and all of that. And it was just very tough to make money and to instill trust in people, because it wasn't that they didn't trust you, they just didn't trust the world.
Right.
So when you evolve, and I always believe that knowledge is power, and that if you can demonstrate yourself as an expert in your field, people will gravitate to you. And so for me, it was all about learning. So I went out and got 6 different designations, professional designations. I took all these exams. And everybody's
How
sitting
old were
next
you at
to
this
me.
point?
I'm in my.
Now, how old were you at
9/11? I was 31.
Wow.
So all during that time, I was trying to establish myself in the workplace as a higher level guy, but I was never always the guy making the most money or the most tenured at the firm, but I was always trying to get there. And I would never be complacent to be in the middle of the pack. It was very competitive to begin with, but they would rank you and post the rankings publicly. Like something they would never do now. But they used to list your name and your rank of your earnings on a bulletin board in the lunchroom. Right?
No way that would happen now.
No way.
No, not just because it wouldn't happen.
Right.
Not too many people know how to handle it.
When that list came out, you knew where you stood already before it even.
Yeah. It was just now it settles in and it's public now.
Right.
Sees
But I'll tell you one thing that it did. It would motivate people to move up the list, because everybody knew who was at the bottom, and the guys here's an interesting thing. Okay, this is interesting. The guys at the bottom didn't care they're at the bottom, and that always amazed me. Because there you are at the bottom of the list every single month, and you don't care. And the way that you work and act and behave in the office identifies you at the bottom without the list.
Yeah.
But then to have it confirmed on a list and still not care was amazing to me.
Oh, really?
I mean, I can't believe people. I couldn't believe that people. So then everybody in the middle of the pack wanted to be at the top, and everybody at the top wanted to stay at the top. So you had this dynamic where there was a couple people would drop out, a couple people would leapfrog, and it would be like very competitive. It was always kind of around 10, right? It 100 people at the firm. I was always like around number 10. Once I got to 9, I was thrilled because I was like in the top 10. I was single digit.
Yeah.
But the top 8 or 9 guys were so much light years ahead of the rest that it was almost impossible to catch them, but you would never stop trying. And the respect that came down from those guys when they seen you climb up the
Start
list
working your way up behind them.
would make them work harder, and that's a compliment. When someone who's at the top of their game feels like they got to work harder to keep you out,
You're coming up.
I like that.
Hell
So
yeah.
they don't do that anymore. But when the world changed like that, and it was just you had to find a new way to stay in the top 10. So I started to, like I said, take all these exams and try to differentiate myself. I got all these designations, accredited this, certified this, whatever. It doesn't automatically put money in your pocket. It doesn't automatically lift your status in the firm. But if you can use those tools to your advantage and use them the right way, it can. And I remember sitting next to somebody who was making a lot more money than me, could barely spell his own name. And I used to get mad. I'm like, I'm so much smarter than this guy. It was so arrogant of me to say that. But I was so much smarter than this guy. I have all these licenses and all this stuff. And he's still making twice as much money as me. And you know what the difference was? He worked so much harder than I do. I will admit that. He was in before I was, and he left after I left. And I just didn't want to accept it at the time. I said I could work less hours than him because I'm smarter. When I realized that's not the most important part of the equation.
Right.
The most important part of the equation is work ethic.
It's part of it, but it's not
part
the
of
most
it.
important part.
But if you don't have the work ethic to put the tools that you believe that give you an advantage to the best use, then it doesn't matter. So you can't work 1 hour a day just because you have a bunch of fancy initials after your name. But a guy who's working 12 hours a day is going to have more success because he's grinding. And that's so when I started to incorporate that in along with all of the other tools that I wanted to have, that's where I really started to hit my stride. And
What firm? What was the name of the firm you were at?
I was at Gruntel and Company, which is it was a 100-year-old firm, and a lot of these firms now are out of business. There's been a lot of consolidation, but I remember. I mean, it was a beautiful office. There was 100+ people there, and I would always watch the best guys, and I think that was an important step for me. But then, as I got older, I gravitated toward smaller firms because I felt like I wanted to be a big fish in a small pond. But what it also did was it enabled me to learn because it kind of like sink or swim. They just throw you out there. The bigger firms have these very intricate training programs, and they take years and years to get through. But the smaller firms kind of it's like trial by fire. And if you can't succeed, they get rid of you. If you do, they lift you up. And that was important for me. But as we started to go through 9/11, and then there was a recession, and then we had everything going on in the Middle East, and then all these things all these macro factors affected business. You had to adapt. You couldn't do the same things that you were doing 10 years ago. And I found that a lot of people that I came up with were out of the business. 1 by 1, 2 by 2 here, and the circle got smaller, the street got smaller and smaller. And by like 2007, which I had been in the industry at that time almost 17 years, I was ready to move on to the next chapter of my life. And I started to just hate the fact that all of these external factors have more of an influence on my success than I do. Didn't make any sense to me. You could stay up all night analyzing things and punching numbers in spreadsheets and then make a recommendation to your clients and still get crushed. Doesn't make any sense because somebody, drove a truck into the bottom of a building. It just didn't make any sense to me. I get it, but it just was a waste of time. So I wanted to shift gears and I wanted to start my own consulting firm, and I wanted to get into other things.
So in this moment, you're realizing that you love what you're doing. You're in this world, but the type of work wasn't that it got affected from from 9/11 and from some external factors could be halted and could be thrown off out of your control in a sense.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I wanted to be more in control, which is probably part of my personality, but I just felt like I'm a big believer you put in, you get out.
Yes.
So that works in a lot of things, right? Especially you go to the facility, when you put in, you get out. That's obvious. But I felt like what I was putting in, I was not getting out because there were other factors that I couldn't control.
And that could be seen in you probably battle a little bit like, am I thinking into this too much? Am I overthinking this? You know,
For sure.
But
Sure. But I had this long-term vision, and I just didn't see the path going that way. So at the time, I was recently divorced, and I was dating my now wife, Angel, and that was an important part of my life because I was at this transition of so many different things. I was at the crossroads of my life with so many different things that I needed a support network that I didn't have. And, you know, my world had blown up. You get divorced, you lose friends, family, you know, it's tough.
Right.
So, money, right?
Yeah.
I was broke. And I remember telling Angel that this is what I think I want to do because I'm tired of this, and I think I need to do this. I need to shift gears and evolve. And I said, she said, so what's holding you back? I'm like, because I'm already broke, and if I do this and fail, I don't know how we'll ever dig out. And she said, I have faith in you. Just go for it, and don't worry about it. If you can't pay the rent 1 month, I'll pay the rent. She was working, and to me that was just like a foreign concept to have somebody like-minded got my back. And we weren't married, and she was committing to the support of my dream. And it was just an amazing moment for both of us, but for me mostly because it gave me the confidence to go ahead and do it. So 6 months go by, I start this company, this consulting company that is involved in a lot of different things: money management, factoring, you know, lending money to businesses. And all
what was the
this.
name of this company?
The name of this company was Juris Capital Management. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. The banking crisis was on us. Bear Stearns was going out of business. Lehman Brothers collapsed. This was either the best or the most worst possible time to do this. Okay, I felt it was a good time because I thought we were going to fill a void that was created. It was a little naive because those were big behemoth firms, and I was just this nobody. But there was definitely a market for us. But for 6 months, I didn't make a penny, and I didn't have any savings to live off of. Literally, Angel was supporting us, and I mean, it was very, very tough. Like going to the dollar store to buy groceries, like that kind of tough. But it was, I had to keep pushing, and I swear at the 6 month mark, I sat her down. I said, I don't think that we can continue this way. This is just not going to work. I'm falling in. I was paying things on credit cards. Child support was impossible. And I was just like, I don't know. I have to go get a regular job. I have to go punch a clock, which I had never done in my life. And I can't do it. And she said, give it another month. Just give it another month. And this was in the end of 2007. And by December of that year, I just got a stroke of luck, or whatever you want to call it. And we got our first big client, and money started to flow in a little bit at a time, but enough to pay the bills, where I was able to get confidence and momentum, I believe, to build on it. So I started to really now, instead of being like withdrawn and be like, oh my God, I'm going to fail. Now I got a little bit of confidence. I got like a little shot in the arm, and I was like, okay, no, I can do this. Now I can do this. So let me figure out what worked, and let's just keep doing that. And within a year, I had taken a company. I started at zero. Within a year, we were doing like, I don't know, somewhere between $2 and $3 million. And then the second year, we did almost $6 million. And then the year after that, we did like $12 million. So it happened like that.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, it felt like that.
It felt like that. Hold on, yeah, that's called compounded success. It's a
But
beautiful thing.
at that moment, when we got to that third year, now I took that experience and I parlayed it into another relationship where I hooked up with some guys that had experience, not doing exactly what I did, but wanted to, but they had other experience. They brought other things to the table, and we partnered up, and then we built that company up to $25 million that in a couple of years, and I moved on from them because we outgrew each other and they wanted to go in a different direction. But then I took that and built it up to 50 million with a new group of people, which is great. Everybody plays their part. And then the pandemic hits.
So the company that you built after...
So Global Factors...
That's Global Factors.
Yeah, so Global Factors evolved out of this whole experience. And we primarily, provided short-term funds to businesses, just like yours, guys that are owner-operators, right? Anywhere from $1 million to $10 million in revenue annually, and we would provide them capital, consulting services on how to tighten up their bottom line and maybe reduce expenses, increase profit margins. We hook them up with accountants, tax people, vendors of all different kinds, depending on their industry.
Right.
And we came like this whole suite of services, like this one-stop shopping. But mostly it was the capital because that's what they needed in order to grow, but they needed to use it effectively.
Right.
So when we started to hit our stride and we thought we were going to take this company to 100 million, then all of a sudden the only thing in the universe that could derail a company like us that's catering to small businesses as all of its entire 100% of its client base, it was the pandemic. And they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to shut every small business door so that they can't operate. And it just completely stopped our business. So
I think at this point you've been pretty battle tested.
I thought I'd seen everything. I used to always use that even in my own spiel. I've seen everything. I've been there, done that. 9/11, the recessions, the banking crisis, all of Lehman Brothers. How about this? How about a global viral pandemic?
Yeah, you seen that?
That's going to close every business. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah.
So now I'm careful. I don't say I've seen everything.
We don't need
yet.
money right now. We need to get a little house to be open.
Exactly.
Can you
So-
do that for us?
But at that point, now we had to pivot again because we had to find a way to not only stay afloat, which was tough enough on its own because we are also a small business.
Right.
So, but we had to find a way to stay afloat, support our customers in their biggest hour of need, but still also retain all of our rights to what they already owe us. And it was a delicate balance because you're talking about people who have businesses for 20, 30 years that all of a sudden now can't open their doors and they can't feed their families. So for me to call them up and give them a hard time is a waste of time. It's not going to fix the situation. It's not going to make the relationship better.
Yeah.
So we did the opposite. I got on the phone. I called every single customer personally and told them, "Don't worry about it. We'll work with you. We'll give you a couple of months off. We're gonna figure it out together, and we'll see what happens." We didn't know that it was going to last as long as it did. We thought it was going to be a few weeks, but obviously it was much longer than that, and we ended up holding their hand all year. And then when things started to loosen up and restrictions were lifted, these businesses started to reopen, who did they come to first for advice and for business was they came to us. And what was interesting is that we may not have been working as hard in the office, and we had all gone to remote by that point, but we didn't have much to do. So what did I do? I came here. I came relentless every morning, like it was my job. And it became part of my job. And this is something that I take from you that you told me. I thought it was selfish of me to come to come here to work out because I had so much going on that I had to do. Wasn't enough hours in the day to begin with, and here I am stealing an hour and a half to come here because I got to drive here, I got to work out, I got to drive home, shower, whatever, get ready for the day. And I'm like, I don't have 90 minutes to spare as it is, and I'm gonna go work out like some idiot.
Yeah.
So, Matt reinforced to me. He said, "You deserve to have this time, but more importantly, it makes you a better you, so that you can help everyone else and be a better husband, a better father, a better son, a better CEO, a better everything. Because if you break down, physically, mentally, whatever, what use are you to everyone else that's been depending on you, both personally and professionally?" So when I started to embrace that way of thinking, I was like, okay, I can buy into that. It sounds like a little bit of hooey because you're the owner of the facility, right? But I'm like, no, it makes sense because I did feel better when I got out of here. I was always happy that I took the time to come work out, because I walk out of here with a bounce in my step, and I go attack the day, as we always say.
Yeah, that's it.
But I realize that is more true than even you know, because it's changed my life, because I now make it, as I said in the beginning, part of my schedule, and everyone else can work around it. And I tell them, I'm unavailable between 7 and 8 in the morning, and it just, whatever you want to tell me at 7:01 can wait until 8:15.
Right, for sure.
And that's it. And once I was okay with that, and everyone else was okay with it, which everyone already was okay with it. I was
You had to be okay with knowing that they're okay with it.
I was making a bigger deal out of it in my own head. Nobody cares if they call you at 7:15 or 8:15.
Yeah, right.
The world doesn't end because you don't answer a phone call for 60 minutes.
Right.
But the pandemic allowed me to make that change. So out of this terrible event comes two things. Number one, I changed my whole lifestyle in terms of my physical fitness and my commitment to it and all that. I changed my mindset to, I need to be the best version of myself, not only for me, because I thought that was a selfish reason, but for everybody else.
Right.
Something I learned from you. And then the third thing that was born out of it was, professionally, everything was crumbling, okay? By no fault of our own, again.
Yep.
And I said, we need to pivot again. So while everyone else, during the middle of the pandemic, I'm talking about April, May, June of last year, is running out of the burning building, we're running into it. Buying assets at the bottom, restructuring everything that we've done with the mindset that this is not going to last forever, right? So my experience in seeing other things came to my aid in this moment, because after 9/11, the market got crushed. Real estate got crushed, right? Everybody fled out of downtown Manhattan. Go there now. Go downtown Manhattan now. Look at the buildings that they've built and how much those apartments and condos cost.
Right.
You can't afford them.
Right.
20 years ago, you could have bought the entire block. Okay? Nobody wanted it. So the lesson I learned is that this doesn't last forever, and you have to, yes, you have to make calculated decisions because timing is important. But if you have a long-term vision, you can usually ride out some of the toughest things. And all those things I talked about, the collapse of Lehman and the banking,
right.
all that stuff eventually didn't matter. It all came back.
Right.
And we restructured everything, and we formed a new company called Propellus, which I love the name because it's like propel us, and our slogan is moving business forward, so we got that whole Propellus forward thing going. And we took everything that we had, rolled it into the new company, and then we also went out and bought as much cheap assets as we could. And then to add another wrinkle to it, we had the unique opportunity of taking the company public. So we were able to do all of these amazing things in the middle of a pandemic when no one was thinking about growing a business. They were thinking about just surviving. And here we were, not taking salary. Nobody on my team took a salary for 10 months. We're just pushing and working nonstop, day and night, for free, to build something that we know when the dust clears, we're going to have something. And now we're realizing that in the last couple of months. It took a little bit longer than we wanted because there's a lot of administrative tasks behind the scenes that were delayed because of the pandemic. Certain administrative offices were closed, there were skeleton staff and whatnot, but we're at the point now where I believe we're positioned to be the biggest we've ever been, and in part you have to credit the pandemic for both personally and professionally for me to make me a better person physically, but then also we use that time to professionally rework our approach and evolve.
But this is also a huge example of using the past too, because 9/11, those other things that happened in your life, in your career, in your journey, were that prepared you for the feeling of the pandemic.
100%.
Right? So that again, and we reflect back, and Matt and I just looked at each other a couple of times, but like in this moment for Matt and I, and for our Relentless family and community that's listening, we took this step back, and everyone that is involved could vouch for this, and we did it in our industry, what you just talked about. Obviously we're not in the finance world, we're not going to finance.
It happens in
but
every
what we did is
industry,
we we took a moment. We knew our doors were closed. We said we have this service that we provide for these people. How could we ask them to pay for this right now with all the unknown in the world?
Right.
No matter if they're one of our best clients or one of our not so freely spending clients, right? We're going to deliver. We got our team together and said we are going to deliver this for free. We're going to keep giving them what they need, especially the industry that we're in.
Right.
We have people that are going to be in closed doors, that are going to be not going out, they're going to be mentally shutting down. We need to keep uplifting them with physical, mental, and emotional practices, right? So we make sure we're delivering programs. We had our weekly discussion groups via Zoom, which we're having 50 to 100 people in it, right? We're doing these things that we did. We had to keep the ball rolling. And we knew, just like you said, when those doors open, everyone will come back because they will remember who was there for them in those moments. That's the business ethics and the values that you
that's
just
something
displayed.
that you can't always put a price on.
No, exactly.
But customer retention is so important. But preparedness is a big part of success as well. And you can see it in a lot of different areas, not just business, but sports and a lot of things that I've done where I learned that being prepared is your best tool for adversity. Because, and you know this saying that I like, crisis is the textbook of leadership. Because when you are in the middle of a crisis and you see who leaps to action, that's the kind of person you want to follow, even when times are good, let alone when times are bad. But that's the kind of person who's going to lead, because knowing how to perform and act in a stressful crisis situation by just being calm and going through what has you learned, like martial arts and all that stuff, that repetitive nature of training under pressure is what gets you out of that situation when it actually happens. Hopefully it never ever happens. But I trained 11 years for something that will most likely never happen to me. But the concept of being prepared
is what you really
I think what keeps you out of trouble.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
So, and sports too. When guys that succeed in the highest pressure packed situations, in the playoffs, in the championship games, and those guys perform, the next time they get there, or when they're there in a regular season game, it's matter of fact. And guys who have never done it, they crumble. And you have to build that up. And you have to either embrace the fact that you folded under pressure and get better, or guys just don't like that. Guys walk away from it. But look at the Jordans and the Jeters of the world. Those are the guys that performed on the biggest stage at the biggest moments. And it's because that they're natural leaders and that they thrive in that situation. And I feel like that's something that you have to be
prepared and build.
Yeah, you have to want it. You have to want it.
These people, they don't have. There's no such thing as the clutch gene. There's no such thing as the ideal with pressure situations. Like you said, these are things that you prepare for, that you build. When these high level, people like ourselves are in these high level situations in our lives and in our world, we don't just all of a sudden say, "Oh, I feel it. I got the juice. I drank the Space Jam juice. Here's my clutch gene. It's kicking in. I'm gonna figure it out." But you go back to those situations, those benchmarks that you set for yourself and overcome, or the external factors that have happened to you. You know what I mean? It's a whole nother topic, but it's such a. It seems so simple. It really does, right? Like, it seems so simple. Like, what do you mean, just being prepared? But that is the base. That is one of the main ingredients.
The problem with being prepared for most people is that it takes work without immediate results.
Plus, a lot of the times too, there's a saying like, what you do when no one's watching. Like what you do in private shines in public.
Well, we say this all the time. So how you do anything is how you do everything.
So whether you're being, if we're working out or training and there's a bunch of people around, you're like they're watching me, or can you do that alone when nobody's around and still
I have to
pull that out?
Straighten up my desk when I leave my desk at the end of the day to go to dinner. I don't leave it a mess.
Never.
And nobody's in there checking up on you.
Nobody's checking.
Nobody's
I was just gonna say.
So for me, it's just being prepared for the next day. I got things in order. I just don't leave it. I'll get to that tomorrow.
Because it adds up.
It all adds up. But I think being prepared is important.
All right. So close things out a little bit, the listeners, I'm sure they're sitting here just enamored with this. Is a great conversation.
Bored to death.
No. This is again. We say this a lot, but this is good. This is an unbelievable conversation. Great perspective. Ralph's knocking it out of the park. I think this is something new to podcasts and being on stuff like this. He puts his head down. He goes to work. But what we're talking about, different sayings and different things that we live by. When pigs fly. Right, that's what they're probably wondering here. For this last hour, they're probably sitting here like, when are they going to talk about what the title of this episode is?
I'll give you a 15-second version.
Hit us with it real quick.
I developed this logo. It's a little angry pig with wings. It was the most masculine one I could find on the internet. And it says, go ahead, and on the back, it says, tell me I can't.
Right.
And I got the relentless logo back there too. But in the early part of my journey, I was working for someone being trained, and I told him, as a young, wide-eyed kid, that, I wanted to be this, and this, and I want to be him, the guy in the corner office. And he said to me, the day that you will ever be successful in this business is when pigs will fly. And this guy said that to me. I was literally working there a month, and I get it why he did. Maybe he was being a jerk. Maybe he was trying to toughen me up. Maybe he was trying to set the bar. Yeah. But I learned that that's not. He was just really being a dick. and literally 6 months later, I took his desk. He got fired, and I took his desk. And I always thought to myself in that moment that whether he knew it or not, he had set something in motion in me. Well, he just unleashed it because I was already competitive. But to tell me that I can't do it, right, is the worst thing you could tell me. And everybody who's in my circle, family, friends, they all make jokes out of it because they know. Somebody says, oh, you can't do that. And I'm like, oh, God, you shouldn't have told me that. What do you mean? So for me, it became like a symbol when pigs fly. And I remember somebody bought me a little pig with wings on it, like a Christmas ornament, and then it became a little statue. And then now everywhere I walk, every time
the whole yard's filled with them.
You see it, but you see them in stores and you see them in wherever. So for me, it's I buy all these little trinkets and people buy them for me because now they know my story, and it's just a reminder as I walk through, and I'm proud of it. I got little pigs in my office, and it's just. I think it's cool, and for me, that's my thing. But everybody can have their own thing. But for me, it was somebody who I thought had no business telling me that I couldn't do something, and then that just spurred me to be who I am. And I'll never forget it ever. As long as I live, I will always remember when pigs fly, because motherfucker, I'm flying.
Cheap motivation at its richest, right? So when pigs fly, don't ever let anyone tell you can't. Episode number 5, the Relentless Way podcast. Listen up on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, and don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Go in, we got some cool stuff going on the video end. Ralph, thanks again for sitting with us, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Matt, we're always good stuff. So attack the day, go get it, and we'll see you next week.